Welcome back to Pro-Life Praise. Can you believe this is episode 22? We started in March or early April. We planned the show and announced that we would be doing the show just when COVID came on the scene. And then early April, we began our episodes. So we're down to episode 22. That's amazing in and of itself. This episode now, I really meant to do it just at the beginning of the school year. It's a very unusual school year because many of the children right now are still sheltering in or being homeschooled and etc. Some of the schools are open across the country, some are not. I want to share with you very briefly right now a speech that First Lady Melania Trump made about education and the importance of children getting back to school.
The first pillar of my Be Best initiative is children well-being and taking care of children's social, emotional, and physical health has never been more important than during the COVID-19 pandemic. The administration has worked around the clock to protect Americans from the coronavirus, but many challenges for children and families can be just as invisible as the virus and just as dangerous. When children are out of school, they are missing more than just time in the classroom. They're missing the laughter of their friends, learning from their teachers, and the joy of recess and play. For children with disabilities, without access to technology, or whose homes are not a safe place, the situation can be even worse. As the start of the school year gets closer, I encourage parents, teachers, and school to teach children about the importance of CDC guidelines and to implement them when appropriate. Children's mental health and social development must be as much of a priority as physical health. The same is true for parents. As we continue to come together as Americans to tackle these challenges, I'm honored that you could all be here today to offer your thoughts. I look forward to working with you to make sure that Americans' children and families can be healthy and thriving. Thank you very much.
Well, we can see now, mid-September, that some of the kids are back in school. COVID bans still have some school buildings closed. Just before COVID-19 hit, President Trump met with students and religious advocates to announce new protections for religious prayer and worship in public schools. I don't know if you know that happened. That was back in January before the COVID restrictions really shut everything down in March. Why don't we take a look at that video?
We are gathered in the Oval Office for the National Religious Freedom Day, something very important and very special, and special to me and the people that are gathered around me. This afternoon, we're proudly announcing historic steps to protect the First Amendment right to pray in public schools. So you have the right to pray, and that's a very important and powerful right. There's nothing more important than that, I would say. We're joined by the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen, and students and advocates from across America. And advocates they were. They've been calling and writing by the thousands, and you're representing that large group of people. In a sacred principle of our republic, that government must never stand between the people and God. Yet in public schools around the country, authorities are stopping students and teachers from praying, sharing their faith, or following their religious beliefs. It is totally unacceptable. You see it on the football field. You see it so many times where they're stopped from praying, and we are doing something to stop that. That is why today my administration is issuing strong new guidance to protect religious liberty in our public schools. The right of students and teachers to freely exercise their faith will always be protected, including the right to pray. So we call this the right to pray. Is that a good idea? Good, right? You like that, right? 9 federal agencies are also proposing new rules to roll back discriminatory regulations. So we have rules to roll back discriminatory regulations on religious service organizations And earlier this afternoon, my White House released a new memo to make sure federal funding is never used to violate the First Amendment.
With prayer back in public schools, to a certain degree, thanks to President Trump in January, there remains another major concern, and that's protecting our children from hypersexualization in the use of CSI curriculum in our K-12 schools, comprehensive sex education. However, we know now that the argument and discussion has escalated. I've got another little video to share with you on that subject.
Teaching 10-year-olds the, quote, pleasures of sex. The folks at the International Planned Parenthood Federation apparently think that is a great idea. That group making the recommendation that's what we should teach our 10-year-olds in a new report titled Stand and Deliver. And by the way, they want that teaching to be mandatory. It is a suggestion that has critics calling Planned Parenthood a bunch of, quote, sex-obsessed adults. But is that fair? Joining me now, Fox News contributor and radio talk show host Monica Crowley. All right, Monica. This Planned Parenthood domestic won't comment on that because they say it's from our international branch and they're closed. We can't reach them right now. But they want this mandatory that we have not just sex ed for 10-year-olds, sex ed, but to teach them, quote, the pleasures of sex.
Right. There are plenty of times, and there's plenty of time in somebody's life to learn the pleasures of sex. A 10-year-old should not be taught that. And here we've got an international organization that clearly wants to dictate to the domestic Planned Parenthood organization to set these guidelines for public schools and organizations. They essentially want the government to put this in place to force the role of sex education onto schools and teachers and the rest, supplanting the parents. This is the parent's role, Megan. This is not the role of anybody else except a parent. If a parent deems that their 10-year-old is growing and starting puberty early and maturing early, then it should be the parent's responsibility and the parent's right to say, gee, maybe my child needs a little bit more education here in terms of the birds and the bees, which now seems like a very quaint notion, right?
Yes.
Birds and the bees. But to hand it off to bureaucrats, whether it's international or domestic bureaucrats or even your kid's teacher, is ludicrous to me. It is an absolute, I think, a total grabbing of control over what should remain in parents' hands.
You know, I asked our brain room to do some research on what 10-year-olds are learning right now in school, and you might be interested to know. This is what the average 10-year-old is learning in a 5th grade. Addition and subtraction of fractions, using dictionaries, reading aloud.
Yes.
The pleasures of sex.
Yeah, no.
That's what they want to add to the list?
What's wrong with that list? The last one.
Well, let me take the other side, because it's obviously, I mean, I called it ridiculous in the tease, which is clearly editorializing. But I mean, can't we agree on anything that 10-year-olds should not be taught the pleasures of sex in class? All right, but let me take the other side. People say teen pregnancy is now trickling down. There was a story last week of an 11-year-old who gave birth. And the argument is people like that, kids like that, need to be taught because their parents aren't teaching them about contraceptives and so on.
Again, individual responsibility. Parents, parental role models, even I would say religious leaders, if they make a moral judgment. I mean, I think the problem here is that you've got an organization, Planned Parenthood, that is very aggressive on sex education, very aggressive on pro-choice and pushing the abortion option onto people of all ages, frankly. You have them coming at this with a political agenda. And my fear is that it is actually removing the role of parents, and if parents aren't present, other kinds of moral leaders, religious leaders, Megan, that can actually put sex into a greater context for kids.
They don't want that.
Right?
This is the issue Planned Parenthood has. They say, in the study, they say fundamentalists and other religious groups, including the Catholic Church and others, have imposed tremendous barriers to young people obtaining information related to sex. And they say currently many religious teachings deny the pleasurable and positive aspects of sex. They want the church out of the business of sex education.
That's exactly the statement that I zoned in on when I read this piece, Megan, because they set aside for particular criticism the Catholic Church, they set aside Islam, the Muslim religion, and some others saying, oh, well, they're blocking our kids from understanding the pleasures of sex. Not the dangers, not unwanted pregnancy, the pleasures of sex. That's what this emphasis is, and that's why it's so outrageous.
You can't even
because
it's not done until you're 16 years old.
It's so unbelievable, Megan, but this is a very secular, progressive agenda. And I think parents in this country, around the world, should stand up and say, this is our responsibility, because what we want to do for our 10-year-olds, our 12-year-olds, our 16-year-olds, our 18-year-olds, for God's sakes, is to give them some context for sex, whether it's religious, moral, values, religious, you name it.
Yeah.
But that is not present in this agenda.
You know, we're going to stay on this. We're going to continue pushing the domestic Planned Parenthood for a statement on this. I mean, I think some people may think, all right, it's international, it's the Netherlands Minister for Development Corporation, this guy Bert Koenders, who is backing this. So let's find out how the domestic Planned Parenthood feels about this and whether they are as far out as this group is. Monica Crowley, always a pleasure, lady.
Nice to see you.
Thanks so much for being
Megan.
here. Well, you can check out Planned Parenthood's report for yourself by heading to our website. You can log on to foxnews.com, and the link is under the latest news tab, and we'll put a link on our show page for that as well.
With prayer back in schools, to a certain extent, we can rest a little bit and begin to think about elective curriculum that lets the children even get a little information about the Bible or things like that. But you can visit Family Watch International, and they have quite a bit of information out there. That's for the adults, the parents, the grandparents. Family Watch International. And but some of the points that it makes is that it promotes kind of activities that should be reserved for adults for physical intimacy. And it's interesting that they're introducing all of these concepts to children from K through 12. Please visit alvedaking.com and the Priest for Life bookstore. We have quite a few family books and children's books at both of those sites. So I'd like to encourage you to visit both bookstores this week. Thank you. This week we are talking about education in a general way. I believe personally that all schools should be good schools. I'm an advocate for good education. That can be public school, private school, home school. It should be up to the parents, if the children, if they're minors, as to what type of educational path they take. Yes, I do support school choice. However, my children have been educated in public and private schools. So have my grandchildren, and so was I. My parents saw fit to send me to private school when I was younger, and I also went to public schools. I went to private colleges and public colleges. So I believe that all education should be good education. Since I do support school choice, I'd like to share this little video with you. Hope for Georgia's kids. I live in Georgia.
I can't believe I found you. I've been looking for a true friend for a long time. Somebody that'll build me up and not tear me down. And a lot of adults was trying to tell me to find you. And I'm so glad I did. I'm gonna tell everybody. I wanna share with you people why my new friend has a love for me that I will defend. If I treat him right, I can depend on never being trapped on the streets dead end. My friend is probably known by most up north, down south, on the east and west coast. Some people don't like me to brag or boast, or take my juice and give my friend a toast. My friend has done the same for many. Gave him everything from hope to a gazillion pennies. He works hand in hand with doctors and attorneys, and he helps me when I read about all his journeys. At first I didn't like him because I thought he was hard, and most of the bad kids thought he was odd. I have come to use him on all occasions. He's my number 2 hero. His name is education. Now I'm able to see, and I will succeed. Now I'm able to see. Education, my hero. With education and my friend, I'm way more strong. I do far more right and way less wrong. I'm able to stand no matter what's going on. Able to process simple no matter what is thrown. Let's try it. Okay, take your music. Listen to what you're saying and see if I can use it. I see your video, see if I can do it. Education says trouble, so I'll refuse it. No wonder most of you don't promote my friend. Cause him not around is how you get us to spend money on crap that you use to offend. Saying the same dumb stuff over and over again. To be fair, I do still believe you have talent. I just wish you would use it to make a point that's valid. That's why education is my number 2 hero. With him and number 1, we'll keep you at 0. Now I'm able to see, and I will succeed. Now I'm able to see. Education, my hero. One more thing about my friend education, he'll help me climb above low expectations. If you were expecting me to get an F, education can't hear that just like it was deaf. Unless I tell my friend to take a back seat, cause I'm gonna drop out and keep my life incomplete. Not me, and I hope not you. Ask for help from people who knows my friend too. With my friend in hand, you can go anywhere. If a place looks strange, you won't be scared. If something is said, you won't be afraid. If something is presented, you won't get played. With a friend like this, it's hard to fail. Without a man, it's not hard to tell. So please try your best to make him your friend. One of the coolest superheroes that will help you win is education. Now I'm able to see, and I will succeed. Now I'm able to see. Education, my hero. Now I'm able to see, and I will succeed. Now I'm able to see. Education, my hero. Now I'm able to see, and I will succeed. Now I'm able to see. Education, my hero. Now I'm able to see, and I will succeed. Now I'm able to see. Education, my hero. Now I'm able to see, and I will succeed.
That was Phil Williams with the music video about education being a hero. I think this is quite entertaining. We've talked a lot about K through 12 education. However, there's education beyond K-12. And Mrs. Pence, Vice President Pence's wife, Second Lady Pence, has something to say about secondary or education beyond high school. So let's take a look at her video.
To military spouses across the world, I want to let you know about 2 extraordinary events designed exclusively for you. In speaking with many military spouses across the United States and in other parts of the world, I've learned about the employment challenges that you face. And that's why I'm happy to inform you of 2 upcoming events that will help. The Department of Defense's Virtual Military Spouse Symposium, to be held on April 24th and 25th, and the Military Spouse Employment Partnership Virtual Hiring Fair on May 2nd. Hosted by the DoD Spouse Education and Career Opportunities Program, or SECO, the Virtual Military Spouse Symposium is a free 2-day virtual event with interactive sessions to help you prepare for your next job, whether you are just beginning your career or re-entering the workforce. The symposium will offer classes on how to conduct global employment searches, build your career, enhance your LinkedIn profile, and much more. And I also hear that LinkedIn plans to make a very special announcement during the symposium. The second event I'd like to tell you about is the first ever Military Spouse Employment Partnership Virtual Hiring Fair, to be held on May 2nd in honor of Military Spouse Appreciation Month. At the fair, you will be able to take the skills you learned at the symposium and apply them to interact with more than 140 MSEP employment partners. These partners have all committed to recruit, hire, promote, and retain talented military spouses like you. Many of the jobs available through MSEP are portable and are in many diverse industries and geographic locations, including overseas. You will have the opportunity to apply for MSET positions, speak with recruiters and hiring managers, obtain resume reviews from a SECO career coach, and learn about other resources available through Military OneSource. You can access the symposium and the hiring fair from your computer or mobile device, no matter where you are in the world. So please, be sure to register for both today by going to myseco.militaryonesource.mil. Good luck.
Second Lady Pence is an educator herself, and she cares a lot about education. We started out with First Lady Trump talking about education, and now the Second Lady. I think that's very important. It's also interesting to note that President Trump has supported historically Black colleges and universities. That's very, very important as well. I believe it was the African American colleges several decades ago that came out with "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." I thought that was a fantastic commercial during those times, and that is actually very true. So here's a video of the historically Black colleges and universities.
Well, university classes are back in session after President Trump's signing of a bill that permanently restores funding to historically Black colleges, which will be getting more than $250 million a year. Joining me now, Bethune-Cookman's University President, Dr. LeBrent Crite. Dr. Crite, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Let's talk about this because there was a lot of anxiety about whether or not this funding will come through. $250 million. I mean, the Trump administration said they were going to do it. Are you surprised that they were able to get it through with bipartisan support?
Yeah, I think a number of us were hopeful and reasonably optimistic, but I think it's safe to say that some of us were surprised with the permanence of it, the fact that this is geared specifically toward minority-serving institutions, Native American institutions, tribal colleges, Hispanic-serving institutions, and historically Black colleges and universities, which of course are, I mean,
a permanent aspect of it helps you to do certain plannings. I mean, listen, there have been articles. Your school's struggled.
No question.
You've got some financial issues.
$250 million in total, $85 million permanent funding for HBCUs. Many of us have begun to think about how do we whittle back the budgets because we were relying on this. So this is really historic and critical. It is an essential, though insufficient, component of long-term sustained funding that these institutions deserve.
What went wrong? Was there over-reliance on government? What's happened here that all of a sudden it's a crisis when people read that student debt is at $1.6 billion, and yet you see the smaller universities, particularly historically Black colleges, struggling financially?
No question. Look, there's a lot of universities, both Black and primarily white or traditional universities, that are really struggling now with the economics, the financial model, if you will, associated with higher education. These smaller schools are particularly vulnerable. That is especially the case for HBCUs, our funding streams, that is students who are often first generation, don't have the resources that others have. They are vulnerable to economic shocks and vulnerable to challenges in terms of covering tuition.
Right.
We pay the price for that.
Can you sort of play a role also for the entire nation? Last year, there was an award given to President Trump. Kamala Harris was going to be a part of it. She protested, but is there a time to acknowledge, hey, no matter what party is in office, when they come through, is there a role that maybe these universities, someone like you, can play to help you reunite the country, put an emphasis on education for all of Americans to be better?
Absolutely. I appreciate the question. Look, Charles, we have to get away from these binary notions of liberal and conservative or Republican and Democrat. If you look at our iconic founder, Mary McLeod Bethune, this was a Black woman from rural South Carolina who came to Florida in 1904 and built this extraordinary institution. She did this by reaching way across the aisles by working with Rockefellers and others to support this institution. Right. And so I am here in part because we recognize the vital role these institutions play in the development and capacity building of our country. And they warrant investment. And we are excited about working with all kinds of stakeholders who have an interest in our students and faculty.
Dr. Crite, congratulations. It was a major step. I'm glad it's done, and we'll be keeping track of you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the time. Have to get you down to campus soon.
We'll be down there.
I want to thank you for joining me today for for this chat about education on Pro-Life Praise variety show. We're going to ask Father Frank Pavone to give us a reflection and a meditation. And then we'll close and see you next time. Thank you.
Well, hello, friends. Father Frank Pavone here, National Director of Priests for Life. Thanks for joining our program today. May I invite you to spend a moment with me in prayer using my book, Pro-Life Reflections for Every Day. We read in the first chapter of the prophet Isaiah, "Seek justice, encourage the oppressed, defend the cause of the fatherless." Reflection: some say, I'm personally opposed to abortion, but I can't impose my views on others. But laws don't regulate views, they regulate behavior. Someone's view may be that you should not be protected, but the law provides you that protection anyway. The unborn should enjoy the same protective benefit of the law, despite anyone's views. Let us pray. Lord, help our nation to protect the unborn, despite the fact that some do not acknowledge their value. Amen. Well, friends, we do acknowledge their value, and we also acknowledge the value of all children. And at a time when we are working as a nation and as local communities to bring our children back to school effectively and also safely, well, this is a very important value to reaffirm. We care about our children's physical safety. We care about their intellectual growth. We care about their moral and spiritual safety. And we have a president and an administration right now that have been effectively working on all those fronts, from their efforts to protect the smallest children within the womb to their efforts to provide parents with school choice. You hear the president talk about this frequently. Why should a family feel that it has to send its children to a failing government school when there are better options available? Why shouldn't we help them to choose those better options? He's a proponent of school choice, school vouchers. He's an opponent of Common Core, which he has talked to the Department of Education about eliminating, something that doesn't really help our students develop educationally and in their moral values as we would want them to. And then, of course, we have the question of basic protection. We have the efforts of this administration, and many people don't hear or think about these things, to strengthen within grades K through 12 in our schools protection against the evil and violence of sexual abuse. We also have the protection of students' rights to pray and to free speech in their schools, on the college campuses. The president has come out very firmly in favor of those who want to use that campus as a way of bearing witness to their faith, of bearing witness to their values, of speaking about pro-life and other important topics. The president has made it clear to these campuses that they are not to discriminate against students based on the content of their speech, and that such unconstitutional discrimination will be met with a withdrawal of federal funds from that educational institution. This is the kind of leadership we need for the sake of our students. These are the kind of values we hold as Americans: freedom, faith, family. God bless our students as they return to school. God bless them, and may they become all that He has called them to be, with the benefit of our help and of our love. Thank you for joining our program. Father Frank Pavone here of Priests for Life.